Hi, welcome to DISCERN. I'm Courtney, and I'm excited to be here with you today. Joining me is Nick Pitts. Hi, Nick.
Hey, Courtney, good to be here again.
Good to see you. All this week we are talking all things digital, and today we're talking about online schooling. Our story comes from the New York Times. Quote, many students are still scrambling to catch up academically after months of struggling to learn online, and some switch schools or dropped out altogether. And while most are back in class today, a sense of profound isolation persists. There are feelings of loneliness and angst. Many students feel that an entire system has failed them, leaving them to take on additional responsibilities far beyond what is typically asked of young people. Nick, remote learning, virtual learning, there's lots of benefits to it, but we're seeing a lot of distress amongst kids and the anxiety. It seems like our administration is facing a lose-lose situation. How can we approach these types of issues, adding to an already divided society?
Yeah, Courtney, you hit the nail right on the head. The reality of the matter is that we're facing a situation in which the pandemic has amplified what we've always known to be true. That since we left the Garden of Eden, we've had to deal in a series of trade-offs. There's no such thing as being perfectly safe. The reality of the matter is there's always been risks, and the pandemic has amplified that. In an effort to be able to keep our kids safe from the virus, many school districts have decided that they're going to keep kids back at home and allow them to virtual learn. The reality of the matter is what we've found out is virtual learning is not really learning and a lot more virtual for some students. A McKinsey study found that the average age grade school student had fallen behind 5 to 9 months right now, specifically in reading and math scores and skills. And so what we're finding is that there's just not a lot of learning that's happening, and there's going to be a lot of catching up that's going to have to happen after this pandemic. And we're also seeing the pullback isn't just limiting their students' learning while they're at home. We're also seeing the value of kids interacting in the same place in school. 3 medical groups have declared that right now, for districts that are in school, that aren't in school learning, that they're calling it a national emergency for mental health for students. Specifically, teenage girls, we're starting to see spikes in suicide ideation as well as in depression issues. And so we're finding out what we've always known to be true is that we're just dealing in a series of trade-offs. One side keenly wants to keep their kids safe from the virus. The other side recognizes that they're in danger by being away from their peers in the building. And there's a lot of us that are finding ourselves trying to figure out, how am I supposed to train up the child in the way in which they should go?
Yeah, it's heartbreaking, and you just realize how important community is and being present in your life. I think that as advantageous as having the internet and online communities has been, we've realized even more how much being with each other is so valuable and life-giving, and how God intended it to be.
Completely agree. I think the internet and virtual learning was an opportunity. It's a great supplement. It's not a good entree. It's not a good main course to be able to satisfy that which we need, which is we need to be, especially for our kids, need to be in the classroom. They need to be learning amongst their peers and interacting with their peers, because as Martin Luther King said, education isn't just the accumulation of knowledge. It's also the development of character, and it's in-person interactions with kids with their peers on the playground, in the classroom, joking around, to learning respect, to learning what character looks like. It's just so important. And that's happening in the classroom, and it's not happening in the virtual area.
It's so challenging when people's response, though, is that in order to love your neighbor, you need to stay home. You need to, we need to be protecting each other from spreading the virus. And it's just hard to navigate that when you know that it's the pros and cons of this are starting to show themselves.
Yeah, and so what my grandma always said, and what I think Jesus demonstrated so well. We'll go with what Grandma Pitts said first, and she said, "Hey, the person who asks the question in the conversation has the power." And more often than not, when we read the biblical narrative, we encounter a Jesus that is quick to ask questions and quicker to have a listening ear. And I think that it's a very well intentioned, and I think it's a very beneficial, and I think it's a good thing for us to be considerate of others, and to consider others as more important than ourselves, according to Philippians 2, try to love our neighbor, according to Matthew 22. But let's unpack what it means to love your neighbor. And because of loving your neighbor, it might seem like it's loving to want to stay at home, but we also need to understand the risks and the trade-offs that comes when you're sending your kids and keeping your kids at home, because there are some detrimental effects that are happening when they're there, and unpacking that through questions and conversations with those you disagree might be a very beneficial thing that fulfills what Jesus says, or what the scriptures say in Isaiah 1 of come and let us reason together.
It's a good reminder that we navigating this, listen and be curious to what other people's fears are and what they're navigating, because that often will give you insight into what you're really talking about. So thank you, Nick.
So great to be with you, Courtney. Thank you.
Thank you, Nick, for helping us navigate this conversation around online school. We will continue talking all things digital this week, and we will see you next time on Discern.